Hmm. Let's try this again. Hello, and I hope everybody's having a great day. This video will be on the T90A Russian MBT main battle tank. And I'm going to do this a little bit different. I try to do a video of this and the tanks start to fall apart, which is not a good thing. But let's try this again. I'm going to do a little bit different. I'm not going to show you the full tank, but I want to show you is the autoloader, because that was a big thing with this tank, and that's what made the turret came off of this thing. And oh well, that is a carousel autoloader that every T90 tank has. That basically came from the old Soviet Union days, where the T-72 used that. This tank is a little bit larger than a T-72. It has a little bit different system setup, and it is a main battle tank. It's a tank that was designed to replace the T-80 as a prime MBT. It was conceived during the end of the Soviet Union, and it was basically trying to upgrade the T-72. And the T-72 was not a bad tank. It just had to be used properly by the right crews. This tank, a little bit different. It came from Timu in a pillow bag with the individual bags marked, which corresponds to the instructions that you have in here, which allows you to build the tank. You start out building the figures, and then the tank comes into play. Now, I'm going to show the figures first because I have them loose now. Tank crew members are not bad. They have a pretty good amount of detail, and the weapons are really superb compared to even Brickmania stuff that I've purchased. It has four soldiers. It has the two tank crewmen and two infantry. The infantry are armed with kind of neat guns, and then the whole tank itself. Now I'm going to put the turret back on. It fits into the autoloader, and hopefully I'll be able to give you a good visual of the. Oh, it went on. All right, that's one step. That's good. Let me put this crew member back in the tank, and now we can continue. Here's the actual tank in all of its glory. T90A. I'm going to hold it up while I get it in a safe spot. Okay, it is a third generation Russian MBT designed to replace the T-72 and T-80. It has a one smoothbore main gun, 125 millimeter. It has an A45T fire control system, upgraded 12-cylinder diesel engine, 1,000 horsepower, gunner's thermal sight, which is right up here. I will point to it as best as I can. I don't want to knock anything off. A blend of steel and composite armor, smoke grenade dischargers on the side. Oh, and what else do we have? And the Kanta RT5 explosive reactive armor. That would be these little panels in the front of the tank. Explosive reactive armor, giving it like a 550 millimeter protective plate because of that. It also has reactive armor in other spots. The turret itself is welded. It's not cast. They're finally starting to weld everything like Western tanks. And it has a Stora infrared anti-tank guided missile system. And what is that? I think these little red lights. This is so hard to do. On the turret. When the tank is being targeted by ground forces or whatever, what happens with it is it gets painted by infrared, by lasers. These lasers in the tank are supposed to go and basically blind that infrared hunting the tank and make the tank not invisible, but not able to be targeted by the missiles, the handheld missiles. But I mean, it doesn't really work because the Javelin missiles that we supply to the Ukrainian army have played hell on these tanks. There are approximately Russia's made, I think, about 4,000 of these tanks. And from my notes here, I wrote down all this stuff here. They lost 187 of these since 2022, since they went into the Ukraine. It's not done well. And the reason being because they do not have good infantry supporting the tanks. Usually, when tanks are used on a battlefield, you'll have infantry in between them. What the infantry does is to protect the tank from people that are going to use rocket launchers or any small devices to go and try to kill the tank. And because they're not employing infantry along with the tanks, it's a matter of tactic that these tanks are going to get killed by javelin missiles coming up, boom, hitting them on the top, hitting that carousel autoloader, which I showed you at the beginning of the video, making the tank do the jack in the box effect where the boom turret blows up, all three crew members die. And that's happened quite a bit. And it's basically because of the autoloader on these tanks. And what I'm seeing from tank on tank stuff in the Ukrainian war is Russian tanks are not as what they seem. I mean, I'd rather be in an old Abrams or an old Leopard or an old Challenger than in one of these. That'd be for sure. And it's a shame because it has a lot of potential. And I'm sure if they use troops in between them, like probably India does, because India also uses this tank. They've manufactured. Oh God, let me see. What does it say in my notes here? 1,200 of them T90Ss that they've made under license in India. So they got just under 2,000 of these tanks, and I'm sure they have no issues because they'll devise tactics to protect it. And if you had troops in between, that would basically negate the fact that ground crew would be in here to try to take these tanks out, giving them better survivability on the battlefield and a chance to actually do stuff. But the problem with this tank is the way the Russians deploy it. And if you're going to deploy it, and the Ukrainians are not some third world country, they're Europeans just like the Russians are, and they're smart. They come up with tactics and countermeasures, which they have done. And they've basically defeated these. And these are not, I mean, crummy kind of tanks. They're actually pretty good tanks, I think. But it's just they're not getting utilized the right way. The tactics that are used for them are not good, and these tanks are getting destroyed, and crews are getting killed. Oh, it's got a V925, a V92 S2 12-cylinder diesel, 1,000 horsepower, 340 miles without those beautiful fuel tanks on the back. It's a torsion bar suspension, maximum speed of 37 miles an hour. It was first used in the Syrian Civil War in 2015, and it's where the Ukraine conflict where you see it getting killed. The two missiles that have had the best luck with this are the Swedish Carl Gustaf anti-tank grenade launcher and the F6M 148 Javelin anti-tank missile, USA. And the thing has done a number on these tanks, which is a shame because it is decent. But also, I've noted, because I've read some Ukrainian um, commentary on different websites about this tank, and they said that the armor is weak and it's not good against anti-tank weapons. And supposedly a mixed steel and composite. Well, the composite, from what I read, from what the Ukrainians were saying about it, is plastic. It's not a thermoplastic. It's not a resonated plastic. And I'll explain what that means. I'm going to go off a little bit from my normal thing here and just explain. This is a Casio watch. If you notice the black part, this is not plastic. They call it impregnated resin. What it is a composite that has metal infused with the plastic. It's baked and put together that way. Middle to high-end Casio watches, their bodies are like this, which I like them. If you take care of them, they last a long time. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just going to show you for that material. That would be sandwiched with the steel in this tank. But according to Ukrainian sources that they've captured this tank, it's more like a plastic mixed with steel. Now, if this is basic steel plating like that, how good is it really? Because the Abrams and the Challenger both use Chablum armor, which, I mean, you can't even tell that there is a different composite material. I've actually seen an older Abrams at a museum near me, Cantini, and I was able to touch it, and it looks like regular steel, and try to flick away at it to see, but you can't. They won't let you go and do that stuff. But Supposedly, the Choblum armor is a combination of steel and a highly impregnated super plastic resin, like you see in that Casio watch. Okay, so as far as would I want to be in one of these tanks? Probably not, because there's nightmare stories about them. But if I was in a unit that had infantry support for these tanks and motorized divisions with it, yeah, I don't think this tank would be a bad tank. The crew is trained well. They understood everything, its weaknesses and its strengths. You play up to its strengths to succumb to weaknesses to make it a viable machine that you'd use in the battlefield. And that's, I think, the big key to this tank is that the Russians are not using it that way. Because of that, the tank is getting hurt bad on the battlefield. It's not holding up well. It's not actually the tank itself or the crew members. It's just kind of the way that they're using this tank on the battlefield, and they're playing up to its weaknesses rather than its strengths, which then would make it a kind of a useless vehicle. And these tanks are not made for urban fighting either. They're going in urban areas, in between buildings, and the Russians should know this. They fought that kind of warfare in World War II, and they're pretty dogmatic, and they know what street fighting is like. They would have never had their tanks like that in World War II. They're used on a battlefield with infantry support in mass groupings, and that's how you use a tank. You want to use a tank in an urban environment, use a light tank or some kind of small gun motor carriage kind of a thing, or scout kind of car. You don't use one of these coming down the streets. I mean, you look at some World War II videos where tank on tank fights, and even in World War II, they realized that there were many shortcomings, and that's why they didn't get rid of the old light tanks that they had, because you can use those in that kind of a situation rather than something big and bad like this. Another little thing, I'm gonna pull this guy out for a second. I'm not gonna put the hatch down because the hatches have a tendency to pop off. Let's see if it'll work. And yeah, it worked. This machine gun that's on here, it's a 12.7 millimeter, 13, I don't know, can be remotely controlled from inside the turret. They can button this thing up, and there's a remote thing where they can shoot this from inside. So it was used basically for anti-aircraft, but it can be used to protect the tank from ground forces that may try to disable it or hurt it and stuff. But overall, if you look at this tank, it's a very nice looking tank, probably a very capable tank in the hands of a good crew. And with the proper tactics, I mean, who knows? It's just that the tactics aren't there in Ukraine. The Russians are not really doing a lot as far as protecting their assets on the battlefield, rather than putting them out there. Oh, they're strong, they're big, they'll survive. No, they won't. They'll get mauled, and that's what's happening. Um, who else has this tank? I'm sorry, I'm kind of awkward with this, but Vietnam has this tank. Ukraine has an unknown number of these. They've captured them. Vietnam has 64. Um, Iran has 73 of them, the T90S. Algeria has 600 of them. But Ukraine has this. And I'm sure the Ukrainians have found the weaknesses and know how to utilize it as far as using infantry support with it. Because I think Ukraine is much more savvy to rapidly shifting in adaptable tactics in order to fight. And with that, they could counter this in the battlefield, and then probably do a better job than the Russians. And supposedly also the models that are export don't have this, the Stora infrared anti-tank guided missile jamming system. They took that out. They added more reactive armor, like these things in front, these reactive plates. It made it more survivable on the battlefield. It's just that the crew has to work better as a crew and not rely so much on high tech things to enhance the tank and enhance the survivability on the battlefield. That could be done if you're used to doing that, like United States, like Germany, like Britain too. The thing is, Russia built their tanks during the Soviet era for mass usage by not well trained conscript armies. Like I said, I've studied about the T-72, and in Warsaw Pact service, they had no problems because you had crew members speaking the same language, same level of education to be able to figure out how to do effectively. And the Russians and the Ukrainians had it. It's just these other ethnic groups that made up the Soviet Union were not Russian speakers and were not able to work as well as far as being able to adapt to fighting in these vehicles, which is a shame because there's a lot of nice things about them. But like I said, if you look in the Eastern Bloc countries where they use these, they had no problems with the T-72. And the countries that have these now, I'm sure Ukraine does a better job of using these than the Russians do. And by looking at them and stuff, the Ukrainians can adapt and do stuff to their own stuff that they have. They prefer the NATO equipment, but I'm sure these and the T-72s that they have, they utilize them quite efficiently and effectively on the battlefield. Um, they carry 22 rounds in the carousel, and I read something from the Ukrainians saying that if you own the loose ammo that are not in the carousel is a big thing. The stuff in the carousel that can be made to be protected so that the top don't blow off, but that just limits you to 22 rounds of ammo carried with the tank because all the ammo would be carried within the carousel autoloading system, which is like a big thing of these tanks. Now, I don't know if the T-14 Armada, the new Russian tank, has that, but if they do get away from that, I'd understand why, just because it's catastrophic if you hit it. Our tanks aren't like it. They have blowout panels, the Abrams, the Leopard, and the Challenger, so you're not going to get turrets flying off like the Russians. And that's basically a design flaw, which can be worked around, but shouldn't actually be there because if it ever became beholden to you to deviate from the tactics that you're using to fight out in the battlefield with these things, you may not want that because it'll kind of mess you up and cause you some real bad grief, which you don't want to encounter. Um, Basically, that's all I have to say. I don't want the thing go for 20 minutes and just ramble on, but I'm trying to give you as much information as I can. I think I'm going to make a video with this and the Abrams and compare the two of them if they were to go up against each other, which they probably will. I mean, in American form, the latest Abrams versus this, and I'm sure these would get mauled because the information the Ukrainians provided as far as how viable this is on the field. Other than that, that's all I have with this. I'm going to come up with a few other videos kind of related to military stuff and related to our little adventure over in Iran, which is causing problems with fuel and other stuff, which is not a thing. I mean, that's good for anybody, but these models that I'm building, these weapons I'm showing you, would be used in a ground war. And so it's good to see them so you get a basic idea of what's there and what will happen if we do engage. And it's a shame that you have to resort to warfare, but that's where I get interested in military equipment, military history. So, and I think this tank deserves a little bit better stuff than it gets. Like I said, you go by the strength of your stuff. Nothing's going to be totally perfect. Things are going to be kind of messed up and stuff. So you want something that'll serve you well and keep everybody alive on the battlefield. And I'm sure they can with this tank, but question is, I mean, the level of success that you're used to seeing with numbers and stuff, I don't think you're going to see that right away with this. I think what you're going to see is just basic what you got right now. That's about all I have for this. I will have another video coming out in a couple of days. This one is with aircraft, probably the F-22 versus, I don't know, see what would go up against it, a MiG-29 basically. But most of them have been taken out. And I think that's what the next one will be the F-22 versus the MiG-29 because that's relevant to the Iranian adventure. I'm going to call it that for now, the Iranian adventure. I understand why Israel is afraid of the nuclear weapons and the other countries are afraid and they're afraid to do something, so they let Israel take the lead and go ahead and do whatever needs to be done. And it's quite messy and stuff now, but I do understand that you cannot allow certain groups of people to have certain weapons because that's just not good for everybody else. Bad for business too, I guess. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one and not as upset with my little quirkiness with it, but I'll try to do better with the F-22 and MiG-29 video, which I will have coming out probably tomorrow sometime. So thank you again, and hopefully you enjoy this, and we'll see you soon.